Hey, hey, hey. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. Listen, I am so glad y'all here. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to talk about this week. And then I reflected on a couple of days ago. I was having a conversation with a friend who was livid. Do you hear me? Upset, child, about someone was spewing information about I guess I won't even call it misinformation. It was more just that I don't know what's happening. That they had a specific positions or thoughts about one candidate who's running for president, and a different set of positions and thoughts about another president. And I don't tend to make a point of telling people who to vote for, but I believe that if you have been with me for any length of time, you know exactly who I'm voting for. I just don't tend to have the perspective that my politicians are someone who I would want to live with, but I certainly think that they should align with my values. And my values are very clear. I know exactly what they are: humor, justice, and competence. And, I also, just in general, try to live my life in a way where I am focused on what is most effective, not necessarily the things that will make me right. And there are only two candidates that have any chance of winning. So if you're planning to vote for a third party candidate, even if everyone put their votes behind a third party candidate, there's no third party candidate who can win. Why is that? Because they're not even on the ballot in certain states, which means there's no way that they can get enough electoral votes. But why do I want to talk about anger today? My friend was so angry, livid, do you hear me, about the hypocrisy that they were experiencing while they were talking to one of their friends. And here's what I've learned about any kind of like social justice work. And I don't spend a lot of time in that space, but I like to think of it more broadly into any time you're trying to change things. There are people, it's basically four types of people. And these four types of people have different levels of energy and emotion, and also varying levels of empowerment, meaning actual ability to do something. And I don't know if people realize that I can't necessarily tell who you voted for, but I can see that you voted. And that it is very public, it's a very public record whether or not you did. And so when you consider folks out here just screaming and yelling into the atmosphere, and then you look at the voting record and you see that they have not voted, somebody like me struggles with the effectiveness of that. And I like to think about anger. And just so you know, I'm reading a book right now. I don't even know if I've got it close to, I probably don't. I'm reading a book right now. Oh my God, I got to find, hold on. Oh, it's called Unoffendable. And it's like how just one change can make all of life better. I do want to warn you that it is a very, very Christian book. So if you ain't into that sort of thing, you want to appreciate it. But it reminds me of some content that I had been exposed to earlier. And I want to disagree with the author, Brant Hansen, about anger. And the truth of the matter is, I haven't been able to. And why is that? Because I can have lots of energy and passion and emotion around an issue. I can be angry about an issue, and that does not mean that I am effective. It does not mean that I am empowered. It does not mean that I'm making any kind of progress. And the late great James Baldwin basically said that to be conscious socially means that you're going to be in a constant state of anger all the time. Love James Baldwin. And being in a constant state of anger all the time is not really going to move the needle. And I like this analogy. You'll have to let me know what you think of it, but I like to think of it like this. My son practices jujitsu, and he's won 3 national championships. And I would argue that in none of those situations has he been angry. He has strategized, he has practiced, he has studied movements down to the nanosecond. If I drop my hand here, what's going to happen? If they move their torso here, what's going to happen? If they um, stick their leg out just this little bit, sweep them to put them down, those kinds of things. He even knows that when someone gets close to him, to just let all his weight hang on them, to tire them out because he's heavy, and when I think about all of that strategy that goes into the equivalent of a fight, and my stomach hurts the whole time, right? Like, I am not a big fan of these more brutal sports. But the difference between someone who is going to win and someone who's not is the street fighters usually don't win. The people who go in there with a whole lot of emotion and rah-rah, and their crowd is all undisciplined, they usually don't win. And when I think about even the pugilistic activities that I have been involved in my life, well, typically it was abrupt. Typically it was not very well thought out, and typically it was driven by anger. I had allowed someone to anger me, and in doing so, thought that I could take that out with my fist. And when I consider the difference between someone who is a trained jujitsu fighter versus someone who's just maybe skilled at fighting in the street, one of the things that I think is fascinating is that we can translate this to how we fight injustice. The amount of energy and emotion you have around an issue does not dictate how effective you are. You can be completely informed about an issue and not have anger at all, but you have put together a strategy with other people to figure out how to address it. And what I've come to learn in reading this book is that um, I got a long list of folks that I'm angry with. And after I had my DNA discovery, one thing that became very clear was that I had never really felt anger, not in the way that most people do. Because one of the exercises this week is to look at those times when you have been full of rage to the point that you've seen red. I can honestly say that that has never happened to me, even in those times when I was physically fighting. It has never happened to me until 2022. And when it did, my hair fell out. I was experiencing anxiety that was showing up in my stomach. I was experiencing anxiety that was showing up as a burning sensation on my skin because I didn't actually know how to deal with it. I had been a master of moving past things, ignoring, overlooking, thinking things were beneath me. And I'm not saying that any of that's wrong. But what forgiveness, and I cannot believe I am the one who's bringing up this word because I used to think I was so good at it. But what I was better at was forgetting things, moving past things, overlooking things, thinking that things were beneath me. But when an injustice actually happens, when you have actually been wronged, moving past something is actually not that helpful. What is more helpful is to recognize what you feel, to understand why you feel it. If you can be able to communicate with the other person about it, um, and then we can start talking about what it looks like to forgive, which does not mean that I agree, that I think it's right. It doesn't mean any of that. It means that I recognize that what is being done to me, I have likely done to somebody else in some capacity. It's recognizing that empathy is understanding what somebody else has done. It's not agreeing with. I can be vehemently opposed to something you've done, and I can still disagree with you, and still understand how you were able to make that choice based on what you felt, what you believed. And once I have had an opportunity to reflect, to empathize, to label my emotions, then either writing a letter and then not sending it, or in the case of this DNA discovery of mine, one of the things my therapist did for me is help me realize that what I was experiencing wasn't a spirit of unforgiveness. It was grief. It was absolute grief. I had lost everything I thought I knew. And I honestly had not even been good with grief. You just push it down, keep going, push it down, keep going. And in deciding that I was going to express all of the grief I felt, the things I thought I had lost, the betrayal I believed had occurred to me, the loss of who I thought people were, but they really clearly couldn't be anymore. Once I'd done all of that, forgiveness became much easier. I can move through my day, not even think about it. But why am I bringing that up on a filter-free Friday about anger? Did you know that screaming into the atmosphere on the internet, while you're not silent, it is not actually doing anything much. Let me not say anything. It's not doing much to move the needle around policy if you're not going to get out there and actually vote. I have a righteous indignation about how we're talking about um, abortion right now. Without medical science, it would be impossible to even see what a zygote or a fetus looks like in the womb. And so this idea that people are talking about something that's the not even as big as my fingernail tip here as life that must be preserved, and are forcing people to have babies, and we are having discussions around who should be responsible for that decision. When I can talk, not when I can. This week, I was talking to a man who did not realize that if someone had a hysterectomy, that they would not menstruate. Married to a woman who had had a hysterectomy almost 10 years ago and didn't even notice that she was not having her menstrual cycle. Now, this person happens to be in favor of reproductive freedom for women. But how many people call themselves pro-life and don't even understand how the life cycle works? And I just can hardly get my head around, as a scientist, that this idea is something that should be controlled by preachers. It should not be. Should be controlled by politicians. It absolutely should not be. This is a decision between a person and their doctor, period. And I cannot figure out for the life of me what we're going to do with 1 million extra people every year. And it actually would be probably more than that, because some of these births will probably be multiples. But we can't figure out what we're going to do with the children we have. And we can talk about adoption being an option. You tell me what it costs to adopt a baby. You tell me who's putting babies up for adoption when we have things like Ancestry DNA, 23andMe. I don't mean to oversimplify it, but I also think we have come to make it too complicated. What I do with my body that has no impact on you whatsoever is my business. And I think it's fascinating that this idea that we're advocating for an unborn child, um, I think it's easy. It makes it easy to advocate for animals, unborn children. They can require nothing of you. They cannot call out hypocrisy. They cannot call out a lack of empathy. But once a child is born and you look at how we treat children and families, where we don't have affordable health care, where we don't have childcare options, where we will vote against pre-K, where we will vote against bonds for public school districts, all of these things tell us that we're not ready for an additional 1 million children. We're just not. And that's why I'm actually asking people to vote yes on 3 here in Missouri, because we need to restore reproductive rights. And if you've ever read Super Freakonomics, there's some compelling data, if you care about data, in Super Freakonomics about what happens with crime. And almost every week on Thursdays, I try to attend the KC 360 meetings if I am in Kansas City. And we're trying to reduce violent crime. But when crime is just continually going up, going up, going up, going up, and you spew out, oh, well, it's the parents, or, oh, it's mental health. Let me tell you, parents have been parents forever. Most people who go to therapy are in therapy because of their parents and what their parents have or have not done. What is more true is that when you project 20 years from a point of forcing people to have babies, guess what you end up with? A crime-ridden society. We have crime because of all of the social determinants of crime. Like poverty is number one, lack of resources, even city design. But you want to see crime skyrocket. 20 years from now, take a look at what it looks like when you have forced people to have babies who do not want them. Actually, it's maybe the only thing that is directly correlated. I used to get mad about these things when people would say, well, what? It was a baby. Oh, there are 1 in 4 women that we know of who have had an abortion. So that means the number is much higher. And what I think is fascinating is that when convenient for some women, they take the liberty to have their own reproductive freedom, to not get pregnant or not be pregnant. But once they have gotten married, once they have gotten their careers intact, once they have grown older, once they sometimes in many cases have grandchildren, once they have found Jesus, now it's a life that must be preserved. It's hypocrisy on the greatest level. And one thing I have come to learn, and and I think is helping me quite a bit, is that recognizing that when someone is being hypocritical, there's nothing that I can say from an empathy standpoint that is going to um, impress upon them to do something different. Like if I think it applies to me but does not apply to you, doesn't matter what kind of data or stats I get presented with. So I say all that to say, sugars, that we have lots of power. And if we understood what kind of power we had together, I don't know. I think we would be able to mobilize quite a few more people to actually vote. And because when I think about what happened in the state of Michigan, 11,000 votes, that state shifted from blue to red, 11,000 votes. That's something like 2 or 3 people per county. We got to mobilize people, get folks out. If you're in the state of Kansas, you still have a few days to still register. But once you're registered, we got lots of work to do to get people out, especially in these purple states, these red states that have these huge urban centers like Kansas City, Missouri, and St. Louis, Missouri. Here in my lovely state, state don't have to be red. We got too many people in the urban centers. Because listen, I have always embraced a conservative viewpoint. Not that I agree with it, but I have embraced it. Where I got lost is when we started to take on more Tea Party-esque types of thinking. These ideas that no, we don't need to talk about the history of racial harm in this country, or no, we don't need criminal justice reform, or yes, we need to align with the police no matter what, or everything should be privatized in a country where people allow greed to rule and get them to do things that are ridiculous. Think about the water quality in Flint, Michigan, or think about again the fact that you care about your workforce, but you won't fund pre-K. Healthcare, my teeth, my eyes are part of my body. Why do I need vision insurance and dental insurance separate from medical insurance? These are all parts of my body. Pre-existing conditions, that's just medical history. Just medical history. And these are policies for which I care about. Climate change is real. The earth is warmer. The polar ice caps are melting. We are having 100-year floods and things that we have just unprecedented developments. The sea level is rising. There are points along the equator where, I mean, it has gotten so hot that people cannot grow food. We got a lot of work to do. We got a lot of work to do. And when I think about the advances in science in terms of how much information is available and how any person can get on a platform and just talk about whatever they want. And I try not to talk about things for which I do not know. But that is not stopping many. So much so that we have all but eradicated measles, polio, chickenpox, and folks talking about don't get vaccinated. That is poison. Millions of people have died because of measles, chickenpox, and polio. And we had all but eradicated it. But now folks like, I'd rather have a dead child than an autistic child. If you believe that vaccinations cause autism, what you're telling me is that you'd rather have a dead child than an autistic child, which tells me everything we need to know about neurodivergence and whether or not people are included or not. These policy positions, besides the character, right? Like these policy positions matter to me. You think about the policy positions that matter to you and vote in accordance with those policy positions. But what you can't do is just tell me that all you care about is a $1,200 check or that these two people are the same or whatever you want to say. Vote based on policy. Vote based on policy. We act like, y'all know Elon Musk is an immigrant. Y'all know that? Y'all know Rupert Murdoch is an immigrant. You know, former First Lady Melania Trump is an immigrant. And these people sitting here telling you that you got to push immigrants out of this country are immigrants themselves. Like these things just do not make any logical sense. Don't make no logical sense. You ask yourself, why are people fleeing countries in South America to come here? Why are people fleeing anywhere to come here? And then when you ask why enough times, you realize that we were the ones who destabilized their country. So let me get this straight. I destabilize your country. You try to leave your country because it is unsafe. And now I'm like, no, you got to go back there. And we would be screaming bloody murder if that was happening to us in any way, shape, or form. It's hypocrisy. How about we go back and stabilize these places we have destabilized? But I can tell you that when I'm screaming into the atmosphere, when I'm angry to the point of seeing red, I am not being effective. And nobody's telling you that you can't feel anger. It's like recognize it, understand why you feel it, label that thing, express it however you need to express it, and then sit down and let's strategize, get some work done. Get some work done together. Because I have never seen one thing. In fact, I actually have seen data that suggests that liking something on social media, making comments about it on social media makes it actually less likely that you will donate to a cause or actually do something to improve a condition. How do I know that? I look at y'all voting records. When my friend Tanisha was running for school board, part of the way you know who you should go talk to are people who actually vote. And it's fascinating to see how many houses we skip over because those people have not voted in a single election. Now, are there reasons for that? Yeah, some people don't have their U.S. citizenship. Some people are still in the probation and parole process, and so they cannot vote. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the people who actually have the ability to vote and then don't. We can see your voter record. So screaming out here into the atmosphere, I don't know. This is my little Bible study guide. It's asking me some great questions about my own anger and helped me to realize that I got plenty work to do around just trying to push past things and actually dealing with them. I don't know. I'm looking forward to more people focusing on this. I read a blog post by my friend Pastor Fred yesterday where he said people have thrown things at him, cussed him out, tried to run him off the road because he's riding a bike. Our anger has gotten out of control. We probably should do something about that so that we can do some good work together. So that we can do some good work together. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. We got work to do.